In the past year, I'm sure that you've experienced some kind of story that you really liked. Whether it be from a book, a movie, a show, a game, anything really. For me, it was the Euphoria storyline in Honkai Star Rail. But looking further than a year back, I've experienced great stories from games like Celeste, Arknights, Doki Doki Literature Club, Deltarune, and more. Not just games though. Also video media like Murder Drones or The Amazing Digital Circus, Invincible, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. There's a lot of stuff. It's not just me though. All these pieces of media haven't just performed well, they've been standouts among otherwise decent creations. If you know anything about the things I listed though, you may have noticed the common theme between them. They're all gay as hell.
My gaze has lingered on her for quite a while, and tonight I initiate our first engagement. A Galaxy Ranger, as mysterious as the rumors suggest.
Hello everyone, this is Woven from Wovencloth on YouTube. This isn't the video I expected to be making for my first edited piece, but I don't mind it being that. This is the first video I'm making in a series I'm calling One Take Talks, where I have a loose script outline for what I want to talk about, but I don't follow it for the most part. I'm going to be improvising it mostly from scratch, because to be honest, my script is not written that well. This video is meant to be a dissection of queer media and why most cases of it seem to perform extraordinarily well. It's my college project, but I've also just wanted to talk about it in detail for a long time, since it's one of my favorite topics to talk with friends about. I started this project questioning why exactly queer media performs quite above average in terms of ratings and reception, compared to other media in the same genre. And now that I've looked deeper into it, I think I can give you reasons as to why, and maybe convince you to look deeper into what you consume as well. So, how do you even recognize the difference between queer media and normal media? Well, a good way starts off with figuring out what standard media even is, or isn't, and likewise what queer media is or isn't. The main thing would likely be the tropes. Take the most normal movie you know, like, I don't know, the Lego Movie. It's well designed and popular, has a great message, and most people agree it's good. Has a lot of very particular design choices, but overall, it's a standard movie where the main character is given a problem, finds an evil organization they have to put a stop to, is given a feminine partner who explains to them what they have to do, who later becomes their love interest, and then they make a big sacrifice, get enlightened, and then save the world. That is an oversimplification, but the point is that this is a decently standard formula. It's the hero's journey. It has the call to adventure, a supernatural aid, a shift in perspective because of that aid, the first helper, the mentor, challenges along the way to the next stop, another helper, repeats of that, going to Cloud Cuckoo Land for more helpers and getting attacked again, having their plans foiled and being in the abyss, a revelation and rebirth, transformation, and atonement. Now, this story structure isn't specific to regular media, it's present everywhere, but the point is that it's formulaic, much like the majority of standard media. That's why it's standard. It's standardized because it's made in a specific way every time, or follows some kind of set pattern at least. More examples of this include a female character being the male main character's motivation for continuing their journey, or a character only starting their journey upon seeing others suffering injustice, without it being something they themselves are going through, just wanting to protect the innocent. Beyond just the main story, romantic plotlines are also written in quite a standard way. As mentioned earlier, it's usually a male main character putting themselves forward for a female character they are attracted to, or God forbid, a female character being fought over by two male characters, which we'll get into later. There's nothing wrong with this, but the fact that it's formulaic definitely makes it repetitive. So what does queer media do to change that? A lot. For one, because queer things are, by definition, not standard, they cannot rely on these same tropes that regular media does, at least not to the same extent. A lot of plot lines involving a straight couple unfortunately relies on patriarchal expectations of women and men, with men being the white knight and women being the damsel in distress. This is literally where the terms come from. If your main character doesn't have these kinds of relationships, you can't put them in this situation, at least not without some thought put into it. Because of this, the writer needs to be creative and change things around in a way that still flows naturally without relying on tropes. In a way, it's kind of made easier by not relying on them. It's kind of like a river against a man-made channel. A channel is structured in a specific way to make water flow, but a river is made by nature to have the water go down the path of least resistance to get to lower elevations. In the same vein, writing a story without relying on tropes can make for a much more natural feeling story, because instead of thinking about what the formula says should happen, you can create interactions purely based on what the characters would be thinking at that point. Especially as someone who knows what it's like in those scenarios, you can write in a way that authentically represents it. It's not a coincidence that most writers of stories like this have gone through the issues they write about. It's hard to visualize these concepts without examples, though, so let's go to probably the most prominent one, Celeste. Celeste is a game about a girl called Madeline, who is a transgender lesbian woman. This is secondary to her actual character, but it's still important to bring up, because it plays into the types of struggles that she faces in the game. Speaking of which, she has panic attacks frequently, deals with crippling anxiety and a huge lack of self-worth. She doesn't really think that she's good enough for the things that she's doing. These are problems that many queer people have, and importantly, they fundamentally change how Madeline approaches the situations in the game. Nobody could be the protagonist of Celeste except for Madeline or someone with the same issues she has, because it would be a fundamentally different story. The main antagonist of the game is those very problems personified, a literal part of Madeline that disincentivizes her from climbing up the mountain. She ends up overcoming the obstacles presented and defeats that part of her, but she can't get rid of her problems. She's tried that before and it only made everything worse. She has to accept that what she sees as problems are the things that fundamentally make her who she is, and accept that part of her back into herself in order to find the courage to climb back up. You don't get that type of writing with a standard main character because flaws have to be manufactured. A character having flaws which are different from regular people but still make sense given who they are is rare, and you only get that when you break away from the normal storytelling formula. Stepping away from full-on stories for a bit, there's also a big difference that can be noticed in relationships between characters depending on gender. In standard stories, most relationships are straight. This is fine, but more often than not, it leads into the pitfall mentioned earlier with the patriarchy. Let's look at 3 examples of relationships in media. One of which is the example of the aforementioned straight relationship, the second being a queer relationship, and the third being another straight relationship, which I believe to still be an example of queer writing, mainly because of the way that it is structured, and in the way that it breaks off from the way that relationships are typically written. First up, Jay and Nia from Lego Ninjago. Yes, Lego is being brought up again. Jay and Nia have a relationship started on the basis of sexism. The moment that Jay hears about Nia in the plot, he is immediately shown to be a typical sexist, misogynist, that type of deal. He's not portrayed in a very negative light, though. It's almost like it's trying to normalize that behavior. But it is very clear that he and Nia would mostly have their interactions defined by this stereotypical guy who wants to get with a girl who is treated like a princess. It's weirdly crude for something released as recently as 2011, but in spite of that, it's not that bad. It's mostly just generic with a lot of overplayed tropes, like the guy being in a dire situation and being saved by her kissing him to shock him into the curing of his snakeness, and him constantly trying to impress her and embarrassing himself in the process. Then you go on to season 3 and it gets so much worse. It's revealed in an episode of season 3 that Nia's perfect love partner isn't Jay, but rather Cole. This came out of nowhere and was not necessary in the slightest. It began an arc that lasted all the way until season 5, commonly referred to as the love triangle arc. It's insane just how poorly written it is in an otherwise good show. But the main reason that it feels so bad is because it was entirely unnecessary, just being the product of a show needing to create conflict between the main cast and having no natural way to do it. This is an example of poor writing as a result of straight relationships and formulaic design. You can make the argument that this can happen regardless of who is in the relationship, but to that, I say a major contributing factor to it being so horrendous was the reduction of Nia's character to nothing more than just a girl who two guys are in love with, rather than being her own unique character with her own traits and such. After season 5, though, the arc concluded and Nia became written a lot better. She got more screen time to be her own character rather than just an object for two men to fight over. Though it would be wrong to not acknowledge that this was still a weak point in the writing that happened. And it was entirely the result of conflict needing to be manufactured with stereotypical straight relationship drama being used as the conduit for that. It was forced in and relied on objectively bad writing tropes to work. Next up, we have Black Swan and Acheron from the game Honkai Star Rail. I showed a clip of them earlier, and I wanted to go deeper into their relations here because it's much more interesting than people realize. For some context, Black Swan is, in the game of Honkai Star Rail, someone known as a Memokeeper. She collects memories from the world and brings them to a library called the Garden of Recollection, so that Fuli, the god of time, can go back with those memories once all of time ends and give prophecies on people. Whatever, the specifics don't matter. All you need to know is that she collects memories for her god, and she can go into people's minds in order to do that. And she doesn't really have a physical form. She's not human in the sense that other people are. She doesn't have a physical body, but she still has a representation of a physical body that she uses to make contact with others. So because of that, she can't really be harmed in the typical sense, which makes what happens next all the more terrifying for her. Now, onto the other character in this relation, Acheron. Comparatively, she is an emanator of the nihility, which means she draws power from the god of nihility instead of the god of remembrance. And nihility is just the concept of nothing, the inevitable end. The way that she got her powers puts her in a strange position in her life where she doesn't really remember things the way that people do. Instead, she just has emotions that she ties to past events, and whenever she feels those emotions, she somewhat remembers those past events. Anyways, in the animated short, Rondo Across Countless Kalpas, Black Swan invites Acheron to have a dance with her. This was Black Swan's way of entering her mind to obtain her memories. The specifics do matter for the story, but we don't need to cover them in order to understand the relationship. If you are interested though, another YouTuber called eIsSocial made a video analyzing this very short, which I will link in the description. What we should cover is the small but very important interactions that they have with each other. A woman asking another woman for a dance with no romantic undertones is strange, but believable. Once you realize that the dance they're doing is the tango, it becomes much less believable. And once you see the things that Black Swan says in regards to Acheron and the body language that both of them show, you're probably already questioning, okay, what's going on between these two? One big thing I want to point out is how their positions switch between the start and the end of the dance. Black Swan starts off in control in the dominant position, holding Acheron in a way that clearly shows that Black Swan is the one who maintains control of the situation, where Acheron is essentially just acting as her plaything. This makes sense given what she's doing. She is trying to put Acheron in a position where she can enter Acheron's mind and obtain her memories. So yeah, of course she'd want to have control over Acheron so that she would have the ability to do that. Later on though, Black Swan is inside of Acheron's mind, and it is a hellscape. She is fearing for her life because she is not a physical entity, so one of the only ways for her to die is inside of someone's memories. And she saw her own death in those memories. She saw the inevitable end of life itself and how she was going to die. And then, as we see her getting sucked into the black hole known as the Nihility, it stops. And we're brought back to the real world, where Acheron is now holding Black Swan, and Acheron is the one in control. Black Swan has fallen out of stress, almost fainting, and it is Acheron that is holding her up, making sure that she doesn't fall to the ground. The fact that they swapped positions in the dance kind of reflects something that can't happen in a standard straight relationship.
Okay, it's like midnight right now, and I'm editing this. I just realized I didn't actually explain, like, how this was a relationship and not just, like, torture. So, in the game, there's a voice line in which Acheron expresses, or not Acheron, Black Swan expresses that she actually liked the dance, even though it was, like, it almost killed her. Something Doom Deary, I don't know. Anyways, I can't really give a proper explanation, but you just have to trust me. They are very homosexual. They are very gay, I promise.
Because with a straight relationship, the dynamic is clear and doesn't really change. Or at the very least, it doesn't change between them. It only changes in regards to the people surrounding them. But here, they can do that. They can show that these two have swapped positions because there is no default for this. It's two women. You can't have a relationship between two women where the man is always dominating because there's no man to always dominate. So it makes sense that over the course of this interaction, their relationship changes, and the person who is in control changes with it. You functionally can't tell this story any other way if you relied on regular tropes, because this is incompatible with that. Though I shouldn't get too deep into this because, like, you know, I could talk about this for hours. I don't want to do a deep dive into one specific scene for like half of the video. Finally, the only straight relationship, which I still think is gay. I can't believe I'm saying that. The two characters in this relationship are Uzi and N from Murder Drones. As I said, this is an example of a well-written straight relationship, but I am a liar. Uzi is definitely not straight. While the relationship itself is technically heterosexual, the actual interactions between the two are still extremely far from the norm. This, as you can probably guess, is still a relationship I and many others consider to be queer adjacent, even if it's not exactly queer. And that's reflected in how it's written. It is a little tropey at times, but it doesn't rely on those tropes to justify its existence, unlike Jay and Mia. See, their relationship doesn't start with a trope, it starts because they interact with each other and find each other interesting, and that's it.
Hey, it's Editing Woven here again. Just saying, I've been at this for like 3 or 4 hours. It is 12 a.m. and we are on the last stretch of the video. Yippee! This is also the longest stretch. The other I split my voice recording into like 3 segments. First one was 11 minutes. Second one was 15. Third one was 23. And we're on that third one right now, which is the longest. Kill me.
I mean, think about it for a little bit. This is a relationship between the man who is a mass-murdering, genocidal robot who is only the way that he is because he was never taught that murder is bad and would otherwise never want to hurt people. And someone else who is the victim of the mass murdering robot group the other is part of, and has every reason to hate this person, but can't because they are just so pure and innocent. It's not often that you see a relationship where the man is the innocent one, while the woman is the jaded one. The closest I can think of off the top of my head that isn't this is like Shrek and Fiona, and even that isn't really like yeah, Fiona's jaded, but Shrek isn't exactly innocent. He just didn't really understand the situation until like he already saved Fiona. That being said, this should not be how a straight relationship is written, and yet it works because the fact that it's not supposed to be written this way is exactly what makes it so interesting. Not relying on tropes enhances this relationship a lot. It's an inversion of the gender role stereotypes where the man is a softie that would never hurt anyone, while the woman is a battle-hardened fighter. That isn't how a relationship typically goes. It's typically the other way around. Not only do they have inverted roles, but with those roles, they actually complement each other really well. En softens the edges that Uzi has, and Uzi shows En that the world is a cruel place, and not to immediately trust everything that everyone says. Uzi herself has also shown some kind of affection towards V, who's a girl, so go my bisexual queen. And that also has its own topics to cover. V openly shows disdain for Uzi, but after a while it's clear to the audience that she does care about Uzi, and doesn't really want to hurt her. The relationship is not simply they're allies so they get along, they both genuinely care about each other. While the relationship between En and Uzi is still, by definition, straight, it still exemplifies all the differences between queer media and standard media, because it's never trying to force a stereotype or a formula. It just does whatever feels right, regardless of whether or not it's normal. And it does that by writing characters that aren't in line with the typical gender roles that we've come to know. Now, this paints a pretty clear picture already, but there is still a question that remains. Why is this pattern specific to queer writing? I mean, if anything, writing something unique should just be the goal in general. It doesn't need to be weird to do that. But what if I told you there's an explanation for that too? After doing the research, I've come to the conclusion that whether you are writing a queer character or are a queer writer yourself, the stories you finish writing will be better on average. Sounds a bit self-absorbed, yeah, but this is the conclusion I've come to, and I'd like to show you how I got here. We've already covered the correlation between queer media and improved quality, and gone over the specific details of what causes that improvement. But assessing the why gets so much more difficult. After all, you can't read the minds of the authors. What you can do, though, is note parallels between the writing and the actual lives that these people lead. This take the form of two different things: the actual storytelling and queer coding, both of which I'll cover. The first one doesn't really need explanation. Oftentimes, queer people will write stories that reflect some sort of struggle they endure in their lives. This isn't even exclusive to queer people, it's just something people do in general. Though it is more common with queer people, mainly because, they're queer. They have struggles because they're queer. The queerness is the struggle they're writing about. Though, to give an example of a case where a non-queer person is writing something normal that is still unique in its own respect, R.C. Hakita Patala wrote a story called All Imperfect Love Song as a reflection of his own mental state while he was developing his game, Ultra Kill.
Okay, I went on a whole spiel here, but most of it's irrelevant, so I'm just gonna summarize the stuff that matters. The story that Hakita wrote was meant to be in parallel to a dating sim, and it uses the two characters present, Mirage and V1, in order to use them as a conduit to express Hakita's own fears. Okay, that's it.
Mirage, the female robot, talks about how there's no point to life, because whatever they do, the end result will always be the same. Nothing. So there was no point to do anything. And then V1 responds by saying that that's not true.
Okay, I went into another long spiel here because this didn't actually matter too much to the main video, but quick summary. Basically, the meaninglessness of life is not a curse, it is actually a blessing, because if you don't have a greater purpose in life, you can create your own greater purpose in life, and there is no reason to not go for that.
This is not something explored often in media, but it is a good message to tell. And I think the most important part is it's not really generic. It's not something that people usually write about. And it's not in a medium that most people usually write in. Visual novels are not that rare, but they're not common. And they're especially not written this way very often. Hakita wrote this story because it's a reflection of the problems that he dealt with in his own life. That's why it feels so much more impactful the way it's written. Because the struggles that he faced in having that mindset is not only accurately reflected, but also all of the reasons used to justify it are present. And there is arguments to be made for that, but there's also arguments to be made against that, which is what makes it feel real. It's not just, oh, this is an objectively wrong position to have, and you're trying to prove it wrong. No, it's a position that actually makes sense. And you know that because someone was in that position. That being said, this isn't the main example that I wanted to bring up. The main example I wanted to bring up is, again, Celeste. Celeste is, at its core, literally a game about climbing a mountain. But the actual narrative isn't about that. It's about overcoming your own doubts about yourself, and about learning to cope with who you are. These problems are ones that Maddie Thorson, the creator of Celeste, struggled with herself.
Okay, last post-editing voice line, I promise. So I accidentally cut out a thing I said. I don't know. I don't remember where it was. What I was trying to say was that since Maddie Thorson experienced this problem herself, not only was she able to represent the problem, but she was able to represent that no one else.
That's why I said Madeline is the only person who could have been the protagonist of Celeste. Because those struggles are unique and everyone goes through them in a different way. So the only way for the story to be written in the way that it was for the main character to be based on the writer themselves who went through those issues. There is another case that I mentioned earlier though, with how the very nature of doing it causes it to be more unique. And that situation is queer coding. Though it is a bit more complex, so I want to define it first. Coding, in general, is a writing tool people use in order to essentially conceal something. It's a method of getting a point across without ever stating it, so you can have plausible deniability over its mention. Queer coding in particular involves writing a character with a queer identity without explicitly stating what their identity is. Historically, it's been used when writers live in a place that censors those topics. For instance, China, which is where we call back to another example from before. In Honkai Star Rail's Rondo of Countless Kalpas, the romanticness of the situation shown is entirely implied. There is no direct mention anywhere, both in the short and outside of it in the game, of the two characters being interested in each other. The only way you would think that is by the theming of the scene itself, and one voice line that Black Swan has in the game, which is not, it's still not directly stating it. Coding, in this case, is essentially show, don't tell on steroids. They cannot explicitly state Acheron and Black Swan have romantic attraction to each other, because if they did, that would get it censored in Hoyo vs. Home Country of China. So they have to do everything except directly stating it, which leads to much more creative of a writing process. because showing instead of telling inherently requires more thought. It needs the creator to think, how do I get this message across? Does this convey enough? Is this too explicit? Is this not enough? Is there any way that this could be misinterpreted? How can I correct those misinterpretations? This is the result of living in a world where what you want to get across is censored. Ironically, those topics needing to get censored makes them so much more compelling to read about when they're not directly mentioned. This then sneaks its way into writing that doesn't require that censorship. Because if you have experience writing a specific way, you're going to keep writing that way, even if you only did that out of necessity and are no longer required to do that. So, to conclude, when a gay person writes about gay people, it's very gay, and that's awesome. Queer writing generally comes off as being higher quality because of many factors, but the main ones are that the writing itself doesn't allow following a formula because it's inherently too different. The writer typically writes characters like this as a reflection of themselves, which leads to more emotion being put into it and more authentic representation of how you act in those scenarios, and the topics needing to be talked about in a special way, whether it's to avoid censorship or because the topic itself is serious and requires a higher level of care. These factors usually result in writing that is not only more thorough, but provides something different from the status quo, which is inherently what a writer should already be doing to stand out. So the fact that they're writing in this way, by default, gives them an advantage. If you want to have any takeaways from this video, go and read something gay. Go and watch the short I mentioned earlier, or just play Honkai Star Rail, it's awesome. Or play, I don't know, fucking, what's it called? Celeste, yeah, play that. Or, like, watch Murder Drones, or, like, The Amazing Digital Circus. Go my non-binary King Queen, Zubel. I don't know how exactly this video is gonna be presented. I mean, I wrote that in the script before. I know exactly how it's getting presented now, so this is probably not getting shown to the class. Whatever the case is, though, the actual substance of the video is over now, so this segment is just about my experience making it. You can leave if you just wanted to hear about the subject, which is gay writing and such. I messed up horribly writing this. Like, I'm reading the script now, that's exactly what it says to say. But that's still true. I wrote this script at midnight between Saturday and Sunday, May 2nd to 3rd. I meant to get it done, like, I meant to get the entire project done on Sunday, but or not Sunday, but like, I meant to get it done Tuesday, rather. And by Sunday, I hadn't done anything except write the script and record background footage for Honkai Star Rail. Later on, I recorded segments for Deltarune and Celeste, but I think right now, I don't even know if I've recorded everything I wanted to. That being said, I probably still am fine. Though, I still need to learn how to use DaVinci Resolve across Sunday, May 10th, because I'm a week late to submitting this. I need to learn how to use DaVinci Resolve, then edit this all in a single day. Though this is entirely my fault. I had like 2 or 3 weeks to do this, and I'm essentially rushing it right now. I probably should have voiced it on Friday, so I had Saturday and Sunday to edit, but I don't think that far. Well, I mean, I did think that far ahead. I was just too lazy Friday. My only saving grace is technically I already am late, so I had more time to do it. But, like, that time is almost over anyways. Something, well, if it isn't the consequences of my own actions. It was 100% a bad idea to make this as my project. I should have done something that took less effort. But since I committed to writing a script, I can't really back off now. Gotta learn how to edit, had to voice it all in my closet where I had less audio. but also it's very uncomfortable and my nose is getting more stuffy. I'm like kind of sick already, and this is just making it worse. It's just too much commitment though, especially since I don't really know what else I can do given how much time I have. I initially wrote about the topic because I found it really interesting, and I still do. But the more I write, the more I realize the shit I'm saying is just incredibly vague and hard to understand. And I'm kind of worried it doesn't really help anyone understand anything about the topic. Like, yeah, it's cool to see someone hyperfixate on a topic they like, but you'd ideally want to understand what they're saying. I think stuff started breaking down on the "we know what's happening, but why does it happen" segment. Mainly because I didn't know where I was going with it when I initially started writing it. I had a rough idea of the point I was trying to get across, that being that authors generally struggle, which makes them write more creatively, both because it imprints on them and also because those struggles are physically restrictive. But I don't really know how to separate that from what people normally do. It also doesn't help that this isn't purely applicable to writing. There's something distinct about any form of media made by queer people, whether it be games, stories, music, videos like this one. Not even media, just talking with a queer person feels incredibly different from talking to someone cishet. It's not something I can explain, even though I am one of the gays, TM. Tried to avoid mentioning that during the script because I didn't want it to dominate what I was talking about, or make it look like I was just saying because I said so for most of what I was saying. But it really seems like it ended up that way regardless. As of writing this paragraph, I actually just finished the script. I do still think that it has really weak points, and even voicing it now, I still do think that. But I closed it off better than I thought I would. And then I had a whole rant about voicing, but it didn't matter because that was Sunday, May 3rd, and right now it's May 9th. I was assuming that I would have to rush all the voicing Sunday morning, but I didn't. I'm rushing it Saturday night instead, the next week. I didn't lie about doing research, by the way. I did already have a vague idea about the topic beforehand, and the research mostly solidified it. And I'll name the sources I used in the description if anyone is curious, though the main one I wanted to recommend is The Queer Art of Failure by Jack Halberstam. It's a book discussing how queer people have made a habit out of failure because it's not an inherently bad thing. It's actually a really good read, even though I only went through a little bit of it. Anyways, if you by some miracle thought this was a interesting, shallow dive into queer media and its differences from the norm, then be sure to subscribe, like, comment, all that stuff. The hype, I think. I don't think I have hype unlocked, actually. I think there's a minimum requirement for that, as well as a maximum where you can use it, but I don't think I've reached the minimum. Anyways. Yeah, just interact however you want, please. Every interaction makes the sleep deprivation slightly less in vain. Thanks for watching. I'll probably be back with something later. I don't know, depends on if I have a good idea. Maybe I'll upload my first Nami Factory video finally. Trust, that's definitely gonna happen. Whatever my next upload is gonna be, see ya then.